morning, everybody. As Tommaso mentioned, I'm Delphine, and I'm going to moderate this panel on Agentic AI. And I am joined by fantastic speakers. So maybe, Sol, do you want to give a brief introduction?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sol. I'm from Argentina. I'm a lawyer both in Argentina and in Spain. I specialize in criminal investigations and blockchain investigations. I'm currently on a leave from my role as secretary at a public prosecutor's office. And there in Buenos Aires, I also funded the cryptocurrencies task force. I'm currently based in Madrid, where I serve as the president for the Association for Women in Cryptocurrencies, the Spain chapter. And I also collaborate closely with international organizations on best practices, capacity building, and strategy on criminal law and blockchain investigations. What I will share with you today are my personal views and not those of the institutions I mentioned. I want to take a minute to thank Robert and Tommaso and the team for the kind invitation to be here. I'm very glad to join this panel.
Thank you so much. And Luc?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Luc Dufour. I'm here with TRM Labs as the EMEA compliance advisor. I work essentially with private sector businesses, crypto exchanges, payment processors, a lot of banks too, helping them build their financial crime frameworks as they take the next steps into the digital assets landscape. My background is very much in traditional finance, but focused on financial crime investigations and leading the operational teams, doing market surveillance, transaction monitoring, screening. Yeah, really excited to be here today.
Amazing. So I think we should start. And as you all know, AI has kind of taken over our life. But in this panel, we will explore actually how agentic AI is revolutionizing compliance and changing the way we work in compliance. And I'm actually really excited about that. I can't wait to tell you more about it. But we will also look on how criminals are also using it to defraud us. And we will have great insight on that. But before we start, maybe I'll start with a quick definition of what I mean by agentic AI. And it refers to artificial intelligence system with the ability to pursue goals independently and act autonomously within complex systems. Basically, rather than being to be prompt, as we all know when we use ChatGPT, agent takes initiatives. They plan, they execute, and they adjust their action based on real-time data and evolving context. And this is super powerful for compliance. It might be boring for you guys, but when you work in compliance, this is absolutely fantastic. And indeed, today, when you look at compliance tools, most of them will use agentic AI, or at least we do at Solidus Labs, to support compliance team. And what it does, I will just give you a couple of examples. So you can use it for alert triage, and it will take into account the seniority of the analyst, the workload of the analyst, and the case that analyst has investigated in the past. But what is more exciting is on the investigation side. Because what the agent will do, it will actually do an investigation for you, a summary, but what is super cool is like the agent will take data from all the different data points you have. So it will look at KYC data, it will look at past alerts on this customer, but not only past alerts on AML, for instance, but it will look at past alerts on trade surveillance, sanction, travel rule, fraud on all different systems, and will aggregate that, plus looking at market data, social sentiments, and make an investigation. It's really powerful because the amount of time you will gain as an analyst is amazing. And then the next step is that the AI will make the investigation summary. You obviously need to look at it, and it will give you all the reference points that you can click on it. And then it will tell you, this is my recommendation. Maybe you should do X, Y, Z. And in the future, as an analyst, I will be able to say to the agents, yes, please go ahead and do A. And what may A be is like A might be, most of the time when you do an investigation, you need to ask complementary documentation to your customer. So the AI will go and send the email requesting documentation. And then another agent will pick it up and will be able to analyze the documentation received, compare it to internal data that you have in your systems, but also to open source. And then it will feed that back to you and say, okay, besides the documentation, this is the context, and it will give you another overview of what is happening and put it in context of the investigation. The gain of time is, again, fantastic. I mean, I was a compliance officer myself. I think this is amazing. And I'm really excited about that because this is what we are developing in Solidus Labs. But we take a really human-centric approach. So basically, we will have a fleet of different agents completing different tasks, but all agents are supervised by a compliance officer. So the agents, they generate a summary, recommendation, and give you contextual insight for you to take a decision. So for instance, the agent, when you open your tool, you will say, the agent will tell you, this is all the areas I think might be false positives. That's all the areas that I think require investigation. But at the end of the day, it's the investigator or the analyst that will need to look at it and take a decision. So I think that's really important to highlight here. And they work 24/7. This is another big advantage. But yeah, so on Agentic AI, what is really cool is like they understand the goal and use full context on all the data, and this is really amazing. They also can learn from historical cases and from the investigation you've done as an analyst, and then they will be able to adjust the way they work for you, which is, again, super powerful. But I think I've already talked a lot. And Luc, I will be very curious to have your opinion about what you've seen on how compliance team may use Agentic AI. And we also talk about generative AI when we discuss together, so please.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think you covered off, in sort of speaking there, a number of the use cases that I see private sector institutions making of both generative and agentic AI. One of the things that sort of stands out to me is that agentic AI is being used maybe even to make, in certain scenarios you're talking about the AI making recommendations based on information available to it to an analyst, and you have a compliance analyst in the loop who's making the ultimate decision. And I really think that's the key to drill into, in that agentic AI is making the compliance analyst position more of a decision maker as opposed to a workhorse that it traditionally was. Sort of taking myself back to the days where I was doing financial investigations myself. I remember going to all these disparate systems across the organization, which probably resonates with perhaps a few of you out there. As you build very quickly, especially in the digital asset space, you're sort of sellotaping systems together perhaps to make it work. And you end up basically making your compliance teams go out and fetch data from all these various systems. Gone are those days. We have an agent that can, thankfully, go and do all that painful work for us now, and the compliance analyst is the one that's making the decision at the end of the day. So I think that's a really interesting shift that we've seen in the private sector space.
Yeah, and I think it makes your work more efficient because it allows you to gather all the data that before you had in multiple systems. It just gather everything for you, and the gain of time and also the gain on your analysis as an analyst is so powerful, right?
And it's not just scale and efficiency, it's also effectiveness, because the quality of work of some of these agentic AI can be quite repeatable, but it's also typically high quality and very quickly. So what would take an analyst traditionally a long time, and time-intensive activities, an agent can produce very high quality work very quickly, which is of benefit to everyone that works in the compliance field. We want high quality investigations, but we also want them to be done quickly. So yeah.
So basically, you're not going to be fired tomorrow, but you're going to be able to do way more interesting work, which I think is really cool to have this to help you and be more efficient. But well, as previous compliance officer, I'm very excited about that. But, like when you work in compliance, you have cases. They come from somewhere, so criminals are there, and they are also using AI. So, Sol, I'm looking at you, and I'm sure you have some experience, and you can tell us more about how they are doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that criminals are usually the first adopters of any new technology, and this is happening with AI. I mean, for instance, it already happened with blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. At the very beginning, before the positive use cases became mainstream, criminals were already experimenting with cryptocurrencies, and that's why the early narrative was so related to crime, which is something we are still fighting today. A decentralized peer-to-peer payment system that was originally designed for that was adopted by them to enhance their operations and even start committing new types of crimes. So I think that the same is happening with AI. criminals saw rapidly how this technology could be used by them to make their operations even more efficient. So as you said, AI agents are autonomous. They can operate independently. They can work 24/7. They don't eat. They don't rest. They don't get distracted. So you don't need a group of human beings behind them to make them work. And criminals found in AI agents a way to remove something that was slowing down their operations, which are humans. Everything that once required coordination or technical expertise is now automated and run at machine level with no time zone constraints and no human errors. AI agents can reason independently, they can take initiative, so all these things were leveraged by criminals to enhance their operations. What I think it's important to remark is that criminals, they don't face oversight, they don't face governance, no ethical boundaries, so they're pushing the technology to extremes that institutions simply cannot. Compliance teams and law enforcement still have to work within certain boundaries, regulation, compliance requirements, processes. So while both criminals and compliance teams are using AI agents to make their operations more efficient, maybe what we should start asking ourselves, and the room is full of regulators, is what can we do to help compliance teams and law enforcement to scale their operations as much as criminals are already doing?
It's a really good point, unfair competition, kind of, I would say. But yeah, Luc, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, so I think we've removed this human bottleneck through the use of agentic AI that all of these illicit activities at one point had to funnel through. But one of the things that I'm sort of most excited about, or maybe excited is the wrong word. My wife would call me weird for saying that, but I get excited about these financial crime things. Is you couple agentic AI with the programmability of things like stablecoins, for example, and digital assets technology more broadly. This problem's going to grow exponentially. The attack surface that now exists for any bad actor to launder funds through our institutions, to commit cybercrime or ransomware operations, whatever it may be that they're trying to do. The coupling of the digital assets technology and the programmability of that, coupled with agentic AI, it's really something to watch for us, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is on both sides, right? So this is what is interesting. But also just before this panel, we were talking about typologies and new way of manipulating the market. But you made a very good point on that. Look, do you want to tell the audience about that?
Yeah, of course. We were talking about this coming in. So one of the questions we sort of thought we would talk about was what new types of crime are being created by agentic AI or generative AI, whatever it may be. And we're having our debate, whereas my sort of view of these things is there isn't really a new type of offending that's being created by the advent of agentic AI or the rise in generative AI. But what's happening is that original types of offending are now possible to do at scale, efficiently, and highly effective. The example we were talking about was you may have a phishing campaign, and previously you may have been able to, simultaneously operate 100 outreach operations to victims. Now, using generative AI, we can scale that to thousands. So not only is it the scale, but also we can do that through the night, like compliance analysts, sleep. Criminals need to sleep as well, so they'll use AI to do their operations while they sleep. I almost see this as a scaling factor for criminality, as opposed to a creation of new offending or new crime types that we might have to grapple with.
Yeah, exactly. And while you were speaking, I was thinking about, so I also host a podcast, and one of my podcast guests was actually saying a way to avoid scam is just get off of your phone, stop using social media, and get 8 hours of sleep. And I thought that was a good idea, because when you're talking, it's these agents are trying to scam you. At the end of the day, there is a human that is being scammed, right? So. Yeah,
but the underlying, we talk about, for example, the romance scam is now just wearing new clothes in the form of pig butchering, right, and things. So that's the landscape shift that I've seen.
Yeah, and so have you seen new typologies on the ground, or you agree with Luc?
Well, we were discussing this before getting into the panel. I think that Luc might be right. They're not new typologies yet. Yes. I would say yet. We're getting there, But it's true that all the typologies that we already know, they are being enhanced by AI in different ways. I mean, impersonation scams with deepfakes, it's not a new typology, but the way to investigate it and the way the harm that it does is much bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And but this makes me think like, the harm that is being done by those agents. Like, do you think like compliance should also have their own AI agents to fight the criminal AI agents? What's your take on that? Agents versus agents battle.
Well, that's a very good question. I don't know if it's as simple as agent versus agent, but I do think that compliance teams need AI agents of their own. And the reason is straightforward. The speed and the scale of today's risks, amplified by AI agents, already exceed what traditional systems can do. Today's market are too fragmented, too dynamic. They operate 24/7, and the activity spreads across different assets, different venues, different trading platforms, including decentralized exchanges. So no human team, no matter how good, can fight this back. Financial institutions and trading platforms increasingly need to adopt AI agents to be able to understand this activity in real time and across all these different venues. And what I always like to say is that you cannot go to a Formula One car race with a horse, So compliance teams, they need the technological equivalent to a Formula One car. Because if we expect compliance teams to maintain market integrity in an environment that's growing in speed and sophistication, then AI is not a nice thing to have. It's a necessary part of the defensive toolkit to be able to maintain the market, to protect users and the public trust. So I think we're entering a phase where AI-enabled crimes require AI-enabled defenses.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think I will relate to the point you made earlier around the fact that criminals, they have no barriers, there's no regulations, there's nothing that prevents them. So maybe as your point earlier, we should enable compliance team and also the police, right, to use the law enforcement agent to actually use agents to do it. I'm sure they do. I know some police officer in the room, but I will not point out to you. But Luc, what is your take?
I'm trying to think of some metaphor to go along with the horse and the race car now. But one of the things that is sort of in this space that is interesting to me is the ability for AI, whether it's generative AI or agentic AI, to learn about control environments that firms have and to adapt very quickly. And bypass those, right? So the human bottleneck that used to exist was, bad actors would try to understand how your controls work within your exchange. The most obvious example is whether you have a transaction limit, on your account. You can only send 10,000 euros, and they start sending 9,000 in order to bypass that. Controls are much more sophisticated nowadays, thankfully, but the agent can very quickly learn where gaps exist, and I think it's sort of a pragmatic view that gaps will exist, and they can very quickly change their tactics of attack. So whether it's a market manipulation case where they're understanding what controls exist within a specific venue and they're changing their behavior pattern around that. That's what's really interesting to me and what keeps perhaps me up and some of the private sector institutions I'm talking to. How do they combat that without having their own agent to almost fight back and say, okay, I'm seeing this manipulation activity happening, this is how it's happening, I need to adapt my controls in real time to combat that, which isn't something we've seen before, and yeah, something keeping us up.
Yeah, and this is where, again, I think we need to use it more in compliance because that's a pretty big typologies. And we were also talking about the fact, just early on, that agentic AI is also used by criminals to find flaws in smart contract, and this is more and more powerful. This is a typology that is on. We're also talking about agentic or criminals that may use agent to do gross trading and all market abuse type of crime. So, but I'm looking at the time. We have only 2 minutes left, and so I have quite an important question. Can agentic AI detect novel patterns better than rule-based systems?
Yes, absolutely. I think that agentic AI represents a shift in the way that we approach market surveillance because it doesn't wait for predefined rules to trigger alerts, because it can actively explore the data and identify behavior that is not seen at simple sight. So, for example, we can think of multi-venue behavior linking. Today's markets are too fragmented and criminals are leveraging that fragmentation to commit their crimes. So something that might look unharmful in one venue becomes meaningful when analyzed with what's happening on other venues as well. For example, we can think of the Mango Markets case. Yeah. I don't know if everyone is familiar with that case. It occurred in 2022, I think. It was an individual who inflated the price of a low liquidity token, Mango, on one platform, and then used that artificially high price on the Mango platform as collateral to drain the funds. So this was a market manipulation across different venues, meaning that the action didn't happen in one venue, but it was a sequence of coordinated actions. And I think that in this type of cases, Agentic AI can start to make a difference to alert about this behavior before it's already late, because in that case, the traditional systems were not able to alert this behavior before it was already late and the damage was done. So Agentic AI can flag this before and maybe reduce the damage.
Yeah, exactly. And this is actually what at Solidus Labs we enable our clients to do. But maybe 7 seconds. Luc, what is your wish regarding Agentic AI? What do you want Agentic AI to be able to do for you tomorrow?
What do I want it to do for me tomorrow? I think the most effective way to identify and fight financial crime is to be proactive about it. And I think using Agentic AI in order to identify proactively customer populations that are of higher risk for me and to perhaps conduct initial triage investigations in respect of those would be super helpful in helping firms bolster their control environments. And the other thing I would say about that is with Agentic AI, normally this sort of proactive approach to financial crime was, it required a very mature financial intelligence unit within a private sector institution. The banks typically have these, perhaps the exchanges, some of the bigger exchanges, but the smaller players don't necessarily have the resources to invest in these expensive sort of endeavors. But with Agentic AI, you can almost have an army of FIU analysts going out and proactively identifying risk for you. So that's where I see the industry going, and I'm excited for that.
Very cool. And you, Sol? 1 minute, maybe?
Okay. Well, I wish the same, but for law enforcement. I have like a law enforcement background, so I dream of the day of having Agentic AI on the law enforcement side. We're almost always less than the amount of crimes that we have to investigate. So Agentic AI would be really useful to make our operations more efficient and scalable.
Well, thank you so much, and sorry we're arriving at the end of this panel, but thank you for all your insight, and thank you for listening to us today. And if you have questions, we will be somewhere in the room or on LinkedIn.